Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Monday, May 9th. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend because we are right back into these ugly markets here to start the week. Bitcoin making some local lows here below 33K, and that's bringing the rest of the market with it. But, lots to talk about in terms of traditional equity market. One thing I want to talk about, CJ, is stablecoin dominance, because that's one way we can kind of look at investor sentiment. I talked about it a little bit on Friday in the cocktail hour. I want to break it down a bit more today for you guys. But before we get started, CJ, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing good, Monty. And I have to disagree with you. These markets are not ugly. I think volatility is beautiful. But some really interesting earnings we got this week. After the close today, we have AMC. That'll be interesting, as well as Lemonade. And then tomorrow before the open, Norwegian Cruise Lines, Peloton. Wednesday, we have Yeti and some others. And Thursday, Six Flags, Backed, Aurora. And then Friday, Life MD. So yeah, not as many as I thought in terms of big names. But I might as well just share the overall list. But yeah, that's ultimately what our earnings schedule is looking like today. Or this week. A lot of action in the FX market as well. Dollar is just still really strong. Bitcoin finally, falling below 33K here, trading at about 32.8. But yeah, overall excited to get into the market and talk about much more. But how you doing this morning, Monty?
Yeah, doing well, CJ, doing well. It's a beautiful day out here in Chicago, but I will be spending most of my day here in front of the screen, especially with this beautiful volatility that you mentioned today. But like you said, Bitcoin dipping below 33K. I want to pull up that chart quickly because I feel like that is a great starting point here because like you said, we are into uncharted territory here this morning, breaking below this level that we set back at the start of the year that was kind of serving as this local low. This was a level that a lot of people were watching as, a potential level to bounce from. And then we had these consecutive lower highs, ultimately got rejected at that 200-day moving average. And now we are back on our way down, headed below that level. So, this is uncharted territory. One thing that I like to look to when we're starting to enter these regions that we haven't seen in quite a while is investor sentiment. And there's a lot of different ways you can look at that, CJ. One thing that, we've referenced in the past is investor surveys. We actually saw, in terms of the traditional equity market, record bearish surveys just a few weeks ago, 59.4%. That came down a little bit at the end of last week. But, obviously still some very negative price action to start the week in traditional equity markets. Another way you can look at investor sentiment is the Bitcoin Fear and Greed Index. Let me refresh this. Wow. Yeah. 11.
It just dropped 10.
Yeah. I checked it last night and this morning it's much lower. So as you can see there, we are reaching record levels in terms of fear and greed as well. And one other way that I think is a really nice way to look at investor sentiment is in terms of stablecoin dominance. Because, one thing CJ and I will talk about sometimes is Bitcoin dominance and how we can kind of tell whether or not investors are looking to be risk on in the altcoins or whether or not they're looking to be in a more stable asset like Bitcoin. Usually when the market's pulling back, they'll be in Bitcoin. When the market's ripping to the upside, they'll move into the high beta altcoins. But one, true indication of a lack of risk tolerance is when there's capital flowing into the stablecoin market, because obviously, as the name implies, stablecoins don't fluctuate in value. So one thing that is worth looking at is the dominance of various major stablecoins. And what you can do is you can, compare that with the price performance of Bitcoin, and just looking at USDT dominance. Sorry, let me redo this. If you just look at USDT dominance relative to Bitcoin price action, what you'll notice is that there's this sort of inverse relationship where money's flowing out of the stablecoin market. Bitcoin tends to perform well. But what's happening here is we are breaking into uncharted territory in terms of the stablecoin market as well. So USDT specifically is now at an all-time high in terms of its amount of the total crypto market cap above 5.5%. So if we looked at, just this USDT dominance chart real quick, what you'll notice is we kind of have this sort of cup and handle pattern here, and we're breaking out into these new highs here. So this is indicative of tremendous fear in the market, also a just general lack of conviction in speculative assets and the high beta alts that typically benefit from a trending market. But right now, given the overall fear in this market, stable coins are where the majority of the capital is flowing, and we can see that from this ever increasing USDT dominance. So that's just another way to look at investor sentiment, and what it's telling us right now is that there's a lot of fear. People are not putting their capital in highly speculative assets, and thus we may be in for some more pain in the interim here. So just another sentiment tool to add to your arsenal. But any thoughts on what we're seeing from those perspectives, CJ?
I mean, is it the time to panic? I don't think so. I mean, let's go. I want to go over some macro models as well very quickly and just share them. Did post this tweet over the weekend and basically just showed the log growth curves that we had finally been hit at the bottom here. Didn't really, I'm not calling a bottom or anything, even though this post does kind of imply that it is a bottom. Very popular relative to most of the stuff I tweet, which makes me think that it's probably wrong. But overall, we're getting into the point where Bitcoin's seriously testing these cycle theories and beginning to break down, at least from the log growth curves. Now, we do have a long-term linear regression for Bitcoin that's also been quite accurate throughout the years. And so overall, I'm looking at a low, or expecting a low, in between these channels overall. Obviously, we are at like 33 to 32. That could be interim bottom. And then also I'm looking down towards about 25K as well for like the final capitulation leg downward. I don't think it's time necessarily to be shorting Bitcoin. I do like some other shorts in the equity markets we can talk about at a later date. But, one thing I think that's important to look for as an indication of a bottom, and why potentially we have not hit one yet, is volume. We just have not seen the massive spike in capitulation volume like we do typically when we form bottoms. So going back to 2018, during the Bitcoin miner hash war, basically between Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, and you can see this massive spike in volume ultimately led to the bottom. Another massive spike in volume all the way up here at the COVID lows. And we haven't really had that spike in capitulation for Bitcoin yet. It's mostly just been a slow bleed. So I do still expect to see some type of spike in volume like that if we are to bottom. But I think it's going to be within this range, at least in terms of like a local low. I've already seen individuals calling for, 3K Bitcoin, a complete, retracement of the hyperwave. And I think the bears are just getting a little too euphoric in the short term, but we'll see. No need to be a hero, no need to catch a falling knife, but I think from a risk reward perspective, things are starting to become less risky, definitely.
Yeah, CJ, I agree. And to your point about not trying to be a hero or catching a falling knife, I think right now, and this is something that a lot of the analysts at Market Rebellion emphasized on the cocktail on Friday, that you don't necessarily need to be trying to make a tremendous amount of money in this market. You don't need to be hitting home runs with your trades, but preserving capital is incredibly important during these times. And I think that's why you're seeing such an increase in the amount of stable coins in the market, and also why we're seeing such massive capitulation in some of these high beta assets. So definitely keeping some of my capital on the sidelines for the time being, waiting for a bit more clarity. And one thing that Mike Novogratz said just this morning is that it does still feel very much like crypto is at the whim of the traditional equity markets. We're feeling that a little bit this morning. And as long as there's more downside potential in that realm, then I think that, we need to brace ourselves for potential lower levels in Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto market. So, that's how I'm positioning myself for now, kind of staying in the stables for the time being. Got a couple of short positions that I'll talk a bit more about in the Doge of the day. But beyond that, just trying to preserve some capital here as this market gets pretty wild to start the week.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm with you there, Monty. Just looking at some more long dollar pairs versus various currencies, I think the conflicts in Europe and just supply chain issues are going to continue to put some pressure on the euro, as well as other things like the British pound. But would you like to talk about Luna and specifically what occurred with UST and the slight depegging that we experienced this weekend? Luna is basically going to defend that peg with $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. They sent 750 billion, or excuse me, 750 million to, that would be quite a sell order, 750 million to an OTC desk to potentially trade and protect that peg. So you could see, the Luna Guard Foundation sell a little bit of Bitcoin here and force price down. So, with the combination of that, as well as, Michael Saylor's 21,000 liquidation price, I think you do have to, things are interesting. I actually looked at like the $100 puts on MicroStrategy going out a couple months. They're actually very expensive. So there's definitely some bets getting placed on a liquidation of MicroStrategy, whatever Sigma event that might be. But, in terms of Luna, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing, CJ. One thing that we've talked a lot about and crypto Twitter has been crazy about has been the Luna Foundation's purchases and Do Kwon, being very vocal about their intent to continually purchase Bitcoin to add it to their Luna reserves. And the reason why we're doing it, was specifically for moments like this, where we're having mass capitulation across the board. Because the way Luna works and the way UST works is a little bit different than other stable coins. It's not just backed by the US dollar. It's an algorithmically pegged stable coin, meaning that when Luna fluctuates in value, they can burn UST and vice versa. So it's kind of this relationship between Luna and UST, but it's contingent on demand being existent for the Luna ecosystem. And right now, what we're seeing is capitulation across the board in the entire crypto market. So right now, people are rushing to withdraw their UST, withdraw their Luna, and thus we saw a slight depegging in UST just last night. And that's something that you will see when there's sell side demand for both UST and Luna. But with the recent addition of Bitcoin, this is kind of the third element of the UST and Terra ecosystem in general, is this new addition of Bitcoin as a reserve option. So, now instead of just having UST or Luna as options to, cash out from the Terra ecosystem, there is also the option to do so in Bitcoin. So, like CJ said, this may result in some more sell pressure. Also, given the fact that the UST coin was recently depegged, one way they could bring that back to parity is by selling some Bitcoin and burning more UST. That would, bring the value back up. So there are a couple different ways you could play this, or Do Kwon could play this, but likely it will result in some more selling of Bitcoin and thus some more sell pressure on the Bitcoin market. So lots of implications for this, pullback across the market. But one thing that you do have to say is that it was encouraging that Do Kwon has been purchasing Bitcoin in preparation for this moment. So it'll be interesting to see how Luna holds up. For the time being, I'm not looking to buy, but it is starting to reach levels where it's getting more and more appealing. Because one thing that we talked about, CJ, right now it does feel like the market's at the whim of traditional equity markets. But if there is an asset that could show resilience, I would think it would be Luna. It's done it in the past. I think it could certainly do it again. And given its recent pullback, I think people will start looking to dollar cost average into this thing soon. So not quite yet for me, but soon I will be looking to deploy some capital into Luna because I still do believe in the Terra ecosystem. So any thoughts on that and the recent depegging of UST?
Yeah, I know you and I both do not care for the term nibbling when it comes to markets, but if I had to describe some of my behavior this weekend with Luna, that would be it. Because historically, a lot of times we've seen FUD around the UST depegging. We've rallied in the next month or two, 50, or even sometimes in certain cases, 100% with Luna. I mean, you even saw it very recently when we went down to $45, $50, then went all the way back, made a new all-time high. I remember wishing I would have bought that trade. So, at this time around, I feel like I learned my lesson. At least want to have a little bit of exposure, and not going to be shorting this one, at least for this foreseeable future. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Luna can do. Also, I mean, you have many other market circumstances historically where Luna was tested harder in terms of their depegging and in terms of ultimately what they have to back UST now. They have more resources than they've ever had before, and people are still really, really afraid of this event, and they should be. But at the same time, it could present a really interesting opportunity if things kind of hold up.
Yeah, agreed. And to your point, the last time we saw a similar fun around a UST depegging event was here at the start of the year, and we did slide, pretty significantly. Of course, this was while the rest of the market was making or attempting to make a bottom that hasn't been broken until today. But it was a similar circumstance where there was incredible sell side pressure, people getting out of the high beta assets, and that resulted in a slight depegging of UST. But as you can see, in the days to weeks following that FUD event, it was one of the best times to accumulate Luna of this last calendar year. So we are reapproaching those levels. It is looking similar in terms of cascading negative price action. But one thing that I do want to see is price action sort of stabilize like this before I'm willing to kind of step in. So just another historical example of that UST depegging event, but still some pretty scary sell pressure hitting that asset today, CJ.
Yeah, I must say, or I must acknowledge that I think Luna's resilience in bearish circumstances has been a little bit weaker post BTC purchases. So just kind of an observation there. But overall, if you guys enjoyed the content today, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to know more about our trade insights that we'll discuss right after that, some of the Forex pairs, going to share some of the longer term stocks that I'm bearish on as well. Sirius XM is one of them that I've been looking at buying some puts. Also, we're going to talk about some crypto trade setups, things that we've been buying and selling. But if you'd like that and access to much more, check out the link in the description below at markrebellion.com/try crypto. Appreciate it very much. Hope you guys have a great day in the world wherever you're at. And Monty, I'll leave you with the final words.
That's all we got for today. Have a great rest of your day, folks. We will see you guys again tomorrow.